The night Lena Vasquez pulled a dying man out of the Guadalupe River, she had exactly 3 choices: call 911, drive away, or drag him to her truck and pray. She chose the third option. She always had been terrible at making smart decisions. The storm had been building since noon, the kind of slow, inevitable violence that the Texas Hill Country does in late October, when the sky turns the color of a bruise and the air smells like iron and cedar. Lena had been driving back from Kerrville after a 4-hour shift covering for a colleague at St. Anthony's Clinic, her scrubs still damp from the humidity, her hair pulled back in the kind of messy bun that only looks intentional on someone who genuinely doesn't care. She was 29 years old, a licensed practical nurse, and the only person on Ranch Road 1340 when the black Escalade went through the guardrail and disappeared into the swollen river below. She heard it before she saw it. A sound like a cannon shot, the shriek of steel on concrete. Then nothing. Just rain and the river and the darkness pressing in from all sides. Lena pulled over so fast her tires skidded on the wet asphalt. She didn't think. That was the thing she kept coming back to afterward. In the weeks and months that followed, when everything in her life had been rearranged into something she barely recognized. She didn't think. She was out of the truck and down the embankment before the logical part of her brain had a chance to say, "Wait, stop, this is not your problem." The Escalade had landed on its side against a limestone shelf about 12 feet into the water. One door was already submerged. The other was crumpled against a cedar tree that jutted out from the bank. The river was cold, shocking, bone-seizing cold, and it hit her mid-thigh when she waded in. There was only one person inside. He was large, dark-haired, and unconscious, slumped against the passenger side door with a gash across his temple that was bleeding freely into the water pooling inside the cab. Lena couldn't see much in the dark, but she could see that. She could see the blood, and she could see the way his chest was still moving, barely, but moving. Getting him out took 6 minutes and every ounce of strength she had. She didn't know how she did it, exactly. Training, maybe. Desperation. Some combination of adrenaline and the particular stubbornness that had gotten her through nursing school, while working double shifts and taking care of her grandmother on weekends. She braced her feet on the limestone, got both arms under his, and pulled until something in her lower back screamed, and the man came free of the wreckage like a cork from a bottle. They collapsed on the bank together. He was dead weight. She was shaking. Lena sat in the rain for 30 seconds, catching her breath, and then she made her second bad decision of the evening. She didn't call 911. She told herself later that it was the storm that decided it for her, the flash flood warning on her phone, the way the river was still rising, the fact that the nearest hospital was 45 minutes away on roads that were already flooding. All of that was true. But there was also the moment when she'd braced herself against the car door to get leverage. And the dome light had flickered on for just a second, and she'd seen what was on the man's left forearm. A tattoo, black ink, intricate, unmistakable to anyone who'd grown up in this part of Texas and paid even minimal attention to local news, the sigil of the Vega Syndicate. A coiled serpent swallowing its own tail with a crown at the top and 2 Roman numerals below. Lena knew what that meant. Everybody did. She loaded him into her truck anyway. Her rental house was 8 miles south, a limestone bungalow on the edge of a working cattle ranch that she'd found through a colleague who knew the owner. It was cheap and isolated, which had felt like a selling point 6 months ago, when she'd wanted to disappear into quiet and work and not think about the year she'd just had. Now isolated felt like a different kind of word. She got him inside by hauling him through the front door in stages, her boots leaving muddy tracks across the hardwood floor. He was too heavy to lift properly, so she dragged him to the couch, got a throw blanket over him, and spent the next 40 minutes doing triage by the light of her phone because she'd forgotten to pay the electric bill. And the breaker had tripped in the storm. The gash on his temple needed 3 stitches. She had a suture kit in her go bag. She always had a go bag. It was one of those habits that her grandmother had called paranoid and she called practical, and her hands were steady enough to do the work cleanly, even with her heart trying to exit her chest. There was a second injury, worse, 2 broken ribs on the right side, which she couldn't do much about except tape his torso and make sure he wasn't showing signs of a pneumothorax. She checked his pupils, both reactive, checked his airway clear, checked his blood pressure with the cuff she kept in the same bag. Low, but not catastrophically so. She put 2 IV lines of Ringer's Lactite into him from her emergency supply, covered him with every blanket she owned, and then she sat on the floor with her back against the couch and her knees pulled to her chest and tried to figure out what in God's name she was going to do now. The man's phone was gone, lost in the river or destroyed by the water, she didn't know. His wallet was in his jacket pocket, and the jacket was soaked through, and she spread it out on the kitchen table to dry before she let herself look at it. There was cash, an amount of cash that she refused to count, because counting it would make the situation feel more real, and there was a Texas driver's license with his face on it. Silas Vega. Lena stared at the name for a long time. Silas Vega wasn't just associated with the Vega Syndicate. He was the Vega Syndicate. He was 36 years old, according to the license, and he ran the most powerful criminal organization between San Antonio and the Mexican border, and there were 17 separate federal investigations either open or recently closed with his name on them, and he had never once been charged with anything, 'cause the witnesses either changed their stories or moved to states with no extradition agreements or, in a few documented cases, simply stopped existing. Lena had read an article about him in the San Antonio Express News about 8 months ago, the kind of carefully worded piece that said everything without saying anything. She remembered thinking he looked younger in the photos than she expected. She remembered thinking the journalist who wrote it was either very brave or very stupid. Now he was on her couch. She should call the police. She knew she should call the police. She went to her phone 3 separate times and stood there with 911 already typed in, her thumb hovering over the call button, and each time she thought about the tattoo on his arm and the cash in his wallet, and what happened to people who made calls like that, and then had to go back to living in the same small world where the Vega Syndicate operated. She deleted the numbers and put the phone face down on the coffee table. At 3 a.m., he woke up. Lena was dozing in the armchair across the room, not really sleeping, more like existing in that shallow surface of consciousness where every small sound registers as threat, and she was on her feet before his eyes were fully open. He looked at her. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at his arm where the IV line disappeared under the tape. "You pulled me out." It wasn't a question. His voice was low and rough, either from the cold or the near drowning, or just the natural timbre of someone who didn't waste words on things that didn't need them. "You were going to drown," Lena said. She was aware that she was still in wet scrubs, that her hair had dried in a shape that could only be described as architectural disaster, and that she was holding a blood pressure cuff like a weapon. The river was rising. He was quiet for a moment, doing the same assessment on her that she'd been trained to do on patients. Eyes moving carefully, cataloguing, processing. She had the strange feeling of being read like a chart. "You're a nurse, LPN. I work at the clinic in Kerrville. You'd stitched my head. 3 sutures. You also have 2 broken ribs, a mild concussion, and moderate hypothermia. I've got you on fluids, but you need a real hospital, no hospital." She'd expected that. "Okay. Then you need to stay still, stay warm, and let the IV finish. You're not going anywhere for at least 8 hours. He watched her for another moment. There was something in the way he did it. Not hostile, not threatening, just assessing with a completeness that she found more unnerving than anger would have been. "You know who I am," he said. It wasn't a question either. Lena considered lying. She was good at keeping her face neutral. Nursing school had taught her that. Years of delivering bad news to families in waiting rooms had solidified it. But she had a feeling that lying to Silas Vega was the kind of mistake that compounded badly. "I found your wallet," she said. "I needed to know your blood type." Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. "Smart answer. You should sleep. Miss Vasquez." Lena Vasquez. He held her gaze for 3 seconds, long enough that she felt it land somewhere behind her sternum, and then he closed his eyes. She didn't sleep again. The storm blew itself out sometime around 5 in the morning, leaving behind the particular silence that follows violent weather. The kind that feels like the world holding its breath. Lena made coffee. The stovetop kind, because the electric still wasn't cooperating, and sat at the kitchen table with her grandmother's Bible open in front of her, and didn't read a single word of it. She just needed something familiar under her hands. At 6:30, Silas Vega woke up for the second time. His color was better. His breathing had evened out. He pushed himself to sitting with the controlled care of someone who'd learned to manage pain without showing it, and Lena crossed the room before he could try to stand. "Ribs," she said as a reminder. "I know." He was looking at the window, at the pale morning light coming through the curtain she'd never gotten around to replacing. "How long was I out?" "You went under around 10:15. It's 6:40 now." He processed that, nodded once. "There were men in the car with me." Lena's hand stilled on the IV line she was checking. The Escalade? An SUV behind it. They would have been following. She thought about what she'd seen on the road, the rain, the darkness, the sound of the crash. "I didn't see another vehicle. The road was empty when I stopped." He looked at her then, with an expression she couldn't fully decode. Something between relief and its opposite. "That means they think I'm dead," he said. Lena sat down on the edge of the coffee table across from him. "Who thinks you're dead?" He didn't answer immediately, and she got the sense that he was doing a calculation she wasn't privy to. Deciding what to say and how much, and what the downstream cost of each option might be. "The people who put me in that river," he said finally. "They're inside my organization, my lieutenant. His name is Gareth Cross. He's been selling information to the Salazar Cartel for approximately 8 months. Last night he tried to make sure I couldn't expose that." Lena kept her voice steady. "And now he thinks the river finished the job. If your name isn't in any system connected to that stretch of road. No tolls, no traffic cameras, no—" "Ranch Road 1340 doesn't have cameras," Lena said. "I've driven it for 6 months. There's nothing out there." He looked at her with that complete, quiet attention again. "You live alone?" "Yes. Anyone expecting to hear from you today?" She thought about her phone. The shift she wasn't working until Thursday. The colleague she traded favors with, who wouldn't notice her absence for 2 days at minimum. Her grandmother in San Marcos, who called every Sunday without fail, and today was a Thursday. "No," Lena said. "Not today." He nodded. Let out a slow breath that she could tell cost him something with the broken ribs. "Miss Vasquez." He said her name the way people say things they're choosing carefully. "I need 24 hours. That's all. I have one person I trust, and I need to reach him without using a traceable line. If you help me with that, I can ensure." "Stop." She held up one hand. "Don't make me a promise you're going to have to keep. I don't want to know what the promise is." He stopped. "I'm not helping you because of what you'll do for me," she said. "I'm helping you because you were drowning, and I'm a nurse, and that's what I do. Those are 2 separate things. Don't mix them up." The silence stretched between them like something with weight to it. "Okay," Silas Vega said. "Okay," Lena said. "Then tell me what you need." He needed a burner phone, a specific contact number that he recited from memory without hesitation, and another 12 hours of rest that he clearly didn't want to take, and that she made him take anyway by being, as he put it at one point with what she thought might be exasperation, distressingly competent. She drove to the gas station in comfort. 20 minutes each way, cash only, baseball cap, and sunglasses, even though the overcast sky made them unnecessary, and came back with a prepaid phone and 2 breakfast tacos that she ate in the parking lot, because she hadn't realized until that moment that she was ravenous. He made his call. She stayed in the kitchen. She heard his voice, low and measured, for about 11 minutes. She didn't try to listen. She reorganized the cabinet under the sink instead, which had needed doing for months, and told herself that the fact that her hands were shaking was residual adrenaline from the night before. When she came back into the living room, his face had shifted. "He's alive," he said, and it took her a second to understand he was answering a question she hadn't asked about someone she didn't know, who mattered to him in a way his careful voice was unsuccessfully trying to conceal. "Good," Lena said. "My brother. I didn't know if Cross had gotten to him. Is he safe? He is now." Something crossed his face that she didn't have a name for. "My second in command, a man named Santos. He's been loyal for 11 years. He's been moving to contain Cross since last night. He thought I was dead. He's been..." A pause. "He's been dealing with that." Lena set down the mug she was carrying. "He didn't know you were alive. No one did." She thought about what that meant. About a man named Santos who'd believed for 8 hours that his boss had drowned in the Guadalupe River, and had kept working anyway, contained the threat anyway, protected the brother anyway. She thought about the kind of loyalty that looked like that in practice. "You should call him," she said. "I just did. I mean so he can hear you're okay. Not just to receive a briefing." She picked the mug back up. "He'll want to hear that you're okay." Silas looked at her for a moment with something she genuinely couldn't read. "You're very direct," he said. "You're on my couch with my IV in your arm. I've given up on being polished." This time the corner of his mouth moved into something that was unambiguously a smile, even if it was brief and controlled, and clearly not something he deployed very often. He called Santos back. She made soup from things she found in the pantry. Chicken broth and canned white beans, and the rosemary she kept in a pot on the windowsill that was somehow still alive, despite her best efforts at neglect. And didn't think too hard about the fact that she was making soup for a man whose name she'd read in federal investigation coverage, who ran an organization that did things she had spent a deliberate amount of effort not researching in too much detail. She thought about her grandmother instead, about what that woman would say if she could see this kitchen right now. Probably, "Misha, when God puts someone in your path, you help them. That's the deal. Everything after that is his problem." Lena ladled soup into 2 bowls. She was carrying them to the living room when her phone lit up with an unknown number. She froze. Silas was already looking at her. He'd clocked the phone before she'd processed the call. "Don't answer it," he said. "I wasn't planning to. It rang 4 more times and went to voicemail. No message. The number was a San Antonio area code she didn't recognize. Could be a patient," she said. Could be. They both knew it probably wasn't. She put the soup on the coffee table and sat back down on the armchair she'd been occupying for approximately 12 hours now. And they ate in a silence that was strange because it wasn't uncomfortable. It should have been uncomfortable. By every reasonable measurement of the situation, she should have been terrified. And she was aware in the abstract that fear was the appropriate response. But what she actually felt was something closer to hyperclarity. Everything sharp-edged and vivid and immediate in the way that only happens when the ordinary noise of regular life has been completely stripped away. "Why nursing?" he asked without looking up from the soup. Lena blinked. "What? You went to school for nursing? Why?" "My grandmother had a heart attack when I was 16. The nurses at University Hospital." She paused, finding the shape of the memory. "They were the ones who actually told us what was happening. The doctors came in for 12 minutes and left. The nurses stayed. They explained what every number on the monitor meant. They let my mother cry in the break room. They made it..." She stopped again. "They made it survivable, the waiting." He was quiet. "So I became one," she said. "Simple as that. Nothing about it looks simple," he said. She looked up. He was watching her with that direct, complete attention again, and she had the sense that he filed things, catalogued them, stored them with a precision that most people didn't bother with. "What about you?" she said, and then immediately, "Never mind. You don't have to." "My father," he said, like it was an answer that didn't need elaboration, and she supposed for some people it was. "He built something and I inherited it, and the question of whether I would have chosen it, given a different set of circumstances, is..." He stopped. "Is not a question I spend a lot of time on, but you spend some time on it." He looked at her. "Some," he said. The afternoon passed in a strange suspended quality, like the hours after a fever breaks when the world seems both more real and further away than usual. She changed his bandages. She checked his ribs again, confirmed nothing had shifted, gave him ibuprofen for the pain he wasn't acknowledging. He slept for 3 hours in the early afternoon, and she sat on the porch with her nursing textbooks open to a chapter she wasn't reading, and watched the hill country dry out in the thin October sun. At 4 o'clock, the unknown number called again, and then again at 4:15. At 4:30, Silas's burner phone rang. She heard him answer from the porch, heard his voice drop to something flat and precise and entirely different from the way he'd talked to her, and she closed her textbook and sat very still and tried not to listen and failed. When he came to the door, his expression had changed. "Santos found Cross," he said. "And he's been contained." A pause that carried weight she didn't press on. "The men who ran me off the road have also been dealt with." Lena looked at him steadily. "Okay, there's something else." She waited. Cross had a contingency. If something happened to him, a file was supposed to go to someone in the Salazar network. A file with photographs of people in my organization, and one person who isn't. He met her eyes. "Someone pulled you up on a camera at the Comfort gas station this morning. They cross-referenced the truck. They know where you live." The air in the porch felt suddenly different. "How long do I have?" she asked. Her voice came out steady, which surprised her. "Santos is already moving, but I need you to understand what's happening. Salazar's people don't." He stopped, started again. "They don't leave loose ends." Lena stood up. She was thinking about her nursing go-bag, her grandmother's Bible, the important documents folder she kept in the fireproof box under the bed because her mother had taught her that much at least. She was thinking about how fast she could get to San Marcos, and whether San Marcos was even a safe direction to move. "You should go to your truck," Silas Vega said. "Santos will." Lena held up one hand. "I need 60 seconds, she said. "Don't give me instructions yet. Let me think." He stopped. She counted in her head. 60 seconds of actual thinking, the kind her nursing professors had called clinical reasoning. Assess the situation. Identify the variables. Determine the most defensible action with the resources available. She was a licensed practical nurse in her own home with a recovering patient. She had a gas tank that was 3/4 full. She had a fireproof box, a go-bag, and 8 years of being the person who stayed calm when other people couldn't. "Okay," she said. "What does Santos need from me?" For the first time since she'd pulled him out of the Guadalupe River, something in Silas Vega's face went unguarded. "He needs you to get in your truck and head south on 1340. He'll have people at the junction with Highway 16 in 12 minutes. And you? I'm coming with you. You have 2 broken ribs. I know. If I hit a pothole." "Lena." He said her first name for the first time without the formal prefix, and it landed differently than she expected. "I've had worse." She looked at him for a moment. Then she picked up the go-bag. They were in the truck in 4 minutes. The road south was empty and dark, and the cedar trees along the shoulders caught the headlights in moving shapes that her brain kept trying to resolve into threats. She drove at exactly the speed limit, both hands on the wheel, her shoulders so tense that she could feel the strain in her jaw. Silas rode in the passenger seat with one hand braced on the dashboard, not because he needed it, but because she got the sense he was managing the ribs without acknowledging the management. And she let that go because there was nothing to be done about it at 60 miles per hour on a dark county road. "You should know," he said, about 4 minutes in, "that Cross was the one who arranged the accident. Not Salazar directly. Cross was moving to Salazar's side and needed to remove me before I discovered the defection. This wasn't a cartel hit. It was internal." "Does that make it better?" A pause. "No. But it changes who's actually after you. Cross is contained. The file transfer to Salazar didn't happen. Santos intercepted it. So the threat is reduced," she said. "Significantly." She breathed out through her nose. "Could have led with that. I didn't know until Santos confirmed it 40 minutes ago." "Okay." She kept her eyes on the road. "Okay." The junction with Highway 16 came up on the GPS at 6:52 p.m., and as she slowed for the turn, the headlights of 4 black SUVs came on from the shoulder where they'd been waiting, dark and still as parked machinery. One of them pulled forward and flashed its lights twice. Lena stopped. A man got out of the lead SUV. He was in his mid-40s, broad-shouldered, with a grey streak in his dark hair, and the face of someone who had not slept the night before and was running entirely on something that wasn't quite adrenaline anymore but had the same forward momentum. He walked to her window. She rolled it down. He looked at Silas. His jaw worked for a moment. "Boss," he said. His voice was completely even and entirely destroyed at the same time. "Santos," Silas said. "I'm upright. Don't make it a thing." Santos made it a thing by standing there for exactly 3 seconds with an expression that said everything he wasn't going to put into words, and then he straightened and looked at Lena. "Miss Vasquez," he said, "I understand you did a hell of a thing last night." "I was just the nearest adult with a suture kit," Lena said. Something moved across Santos's face that might have been the beginning of a smile. "I'd like to ask you to follow us to a location where we can ensure your safety while we finish cleaning this up. It shouldn't be more than 48 hours. After that, we can discuss." "Santos," Silas said. Santos stopped. "She doesn't negotiate with intermediaries." He didn't say it with heat, just as a fact, a reset. An instruction delivered the way someone delivers instructions when they expect them to be followed without question. "She talks to me." Santos absorbed this. "Yes, sir," he said, and stepped back. Lena looked at the man in her passenger seat, at the careful, composed face that had spent the last 18 hours telling her just enough and not one word more, at the tire she'd taped around his ribs and the sutures she'd put in his temple and the soup they'd eaten in silence in her grandmother's borrowed Bible's company. 48 hours, she said. "That's the outside estimate. Probably less." "And then?" He held her gaze, and again she had the sense of something being weighed and decided. "And then you go back to your life, and you're protected for as long as you want to be. You won't see it, you won't hear it, but it'll be there. I don't want a shadow. It's not negotiable, Miss Vasquez. A beat. Lena." She thought about her porch and her rosemary plant and the nursing textbook she'd left open on the chair. She thought about her patients at the clinic in Kerrville, Mrs. Donaldson with her blood pressure, teenage Marcus with the diabetes he was still learning to manage, the whole ordinary continuity of people who needed someone to stay calm and explain the numbers. She thought about her grandmother. "Mija, when God puts someone in your path." "Drive," she told him. He didn't smile, but the set of his face changed very slightly, in the way that some things change when a decision has been made that everyone in the room can feel. She followed the SUVs south into the dark. 3 weeks later, Lena was back at the clinic in Kerrville. A Tuesday morning, overcast and cool. The parking lot smelling of cedar and diesel, Mrs. Donaldson already in room 2 with her reading glasses on, and her blood pressure cuff in hand because she didn't trust anyone else to put it on correctly. Everything looked the same. Lena hung her jacket on the hook behind the door, tied her hair back, and stood for a moment in the quiet of the break room, with a cup of gas station coffee going cold in her hands, letting the ordinary sounds of the clinic settle back around her. Phones ringing. A kid in the waiting room asking his mother if the shot was going to hurt. The beep of the intake computer. She hadn't seen Silas Vega since Santos's men had driven her to a house outside Uvalde and kept her there for 31 hours while something she wasn't briefed on got resolved. She'd been politely not imprisoned. She'd watched 4 seasons of a British baking show on a laptop someone had provided. She'd been given very good food and treated with a formality that she suspected was Santos's doing, his way of establishing that she was a guest and not a variable. On the morning of the 3rd day, Santos himself had come to tell her that it was over, that Cross had been formally removed from any position of relevance, and that her home had been assessed, cleaned and cleared, and she could return to it whenever she was ready. He'd given her a card with a number on it. "If anything feels wrong," he'd said, "anything at all, you call this." She'd taken the card. She hadn't asked the questions she'd wanted to ask. Now she was standing in her break room with cold coffee, and her shift started in 4 minutes, and through the window she could see the parking lot, where a black SUV had been parked since 7:15 this morning. It had been there yesterday too, and the day before, she'd decided not to make it a thing. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. San Antonio area code. She looked at it for a moment. She answered, "You're back at the clinic." His voice was the same, low, deliberate, each word placed with the care of someone who chose not to spend them freely. "I am," Lena said. "How's Mrs. Donaldson?" Lena blinked. Then she thought about Santos and the kind of operation that ran the background checks he'd obviously run, and decided she was going to choose not to be unsettled by that. "Stubborn as ever," she said. A pause that felt, for the first time, less like calculation and more like something else. "I owe you a debt that doesn't have a currency," Silas Vega said. "You don't owe me anything. I told you that." "You did." Another pause. "I'm going to disagree with you on that point indefinitely. That sounds exhausting. It does." She looked at the parking lot, at the black SUV and the thin October light coming off the hood. "Silas," she said. It was the first time she'd used his first name. "Lena," he said. Outside, the SUV's engine was running, patient and unhurried, like something that had decided it wasn't going anywhere. She picked up her stethoscope, tucked the phone against her shoulder, and pushed open the door to room 2.